White Torture, The Playground Experiment, written by the Midnight Masochist. 2024. What do they want? This question alone ate at me, until I could think of nothing else. Why? Why was I here? I woke up abruptly in a dazed panic, unsure of where I was or what had happened. But my legs ached, as if they had been bent up into a cramped position. And then I heard it, strange words being spoken but not in English. Frantically, I looked about the square white room in horror and dismay as the message switches to yet another language. Where am I? I questioned. What's happening? Finally, the voice changes to English, and I'm able to understand the broken words for the first time. This is an automated message from your... It cuts out, and static crackling interference ensues, leaving me to wait until I almost can't handle it anymore. Then it begins again, only much clearer. Please try to remain calm, as we are working on trying to resolve your situation. This is all the strange voice would say every goddamn morning, for around 2 days or so. But I couldn't be absolutely sure, for there are no watches, no clocks, nor any kind of calendars indicating the date or time. This voice then cuts out abruptly, until the following morning, when the unsettling automated message repeats itself, going through a long list of endless languages until it finally reaches English. Before my kidnapping, if you'd like to call it that, I'd been sitting in my cheap little blue Honda, preparing to head to college, when seemingly out of nowhere I'd became very unusually sleepy. So much so that I must have passed out right there, because that's the last thing I can recall before waking up here, inside of what looks like a lunatic asylum, complete with squishy bleached walls. In the center of the room I woke up naked. Somebody had stolen all my clothes, shoes, backpack, and other belongings, leaving me here to wake up confused and scared. But quickly fear turned into terror. I felt nauseous, I couldn't breathe. I felt as if a heavy weight was sitting on my chest, even though there was no such force holding me down. Even gravity seemed affected, or different. I began to feel dizzy and lightheaded. I couldn't think properly, couldn't concentrate. Soon I became hopelessly wrapped up in the sickening knowledge that I couldn't get away. Couldn't get out no matter how hard I tried. Then claustrophobia began to set in, tormenting me still further. The walls seemed to almost move and close in on me. The air felt heavy and difficult to breathe, growing worse as time passed, and I began to struggle inwardly to stay calm. Despair was crushing me at an alarming rate. Inside this white quilt hell, there was no television to entertain me. Whoever they were, he'd taken my phone, so I didn't even have that. Soon I began to stare at my hands, inspecting my fingernails. Then I noticed, with shocking revolution, that I'd been somewhat roughed up while I'd been asleep. Across my left forearm, I found an array of dark bruises, ugly, sickening greenish marks, as if fingers had gripped my arm hard enough to leave evidence of it. "Let me out of here!" I'd screamed, getting to my feet and strolling over to the door. But of course it had been locked and then sealed, cutting off my screams for help. At first it was too ridiculous to be true. I strolled around the little space, almost unable to believe it. Unable to sit down for longer than a few minutes. Desperately, I wanted to wake up from this cruel nightmare, but it wasn't a dream, this was actually happening to me. Then I noticed the lack of doorknob on the inside of the strange compartment. This showed me plainly that whoever had done this didn't want me getting loose for whatever reason. Who was behind it? I wondered, terrified. This kind of treatment was beyond cruel. They haven't even allowed me to dress myself or have access to any blankets. I began pounding on the walls again, screaming to be heard, enraged that somebody had locked me up without any exclamation. "Help me!" I yell until I'm hoarse. "Can anyone hear me?" I pleaded, looking up at the blank white TV screen and speaker. Everything in the room was painted white. "Why are you doing this?" I shriek, sliding down into a sitting position in one corner, with my back resting against the crude wall, left alone with my thoughts. But somehow thinking had become very difficult. I found it hard to focus on any one thing. Soon I came to miss the feeling of wind touching my face, cool breeze blowing my hair about on windy days. I lounged to feel the warmth of the sun shining down onto my back. I missed the fresh smells of the outdoors, the scent of flowers and city. I would have done almost anything to be given the chance to go outside, even for just a few short minutes. I would have given everything I had in the world just to be allowed to hear noise, given the experience of sound, like people talking or even music. On the floor, tucked up against the wall, I cried openly for the first time, unable to take the strain. Why would somebody want to inflict this kind of mental torture onto someone? It was so difficult to understand, so harsh, dehumanizing to be left vulnerable like this. I just couldn't get used to the constant humiliation of being completely bare in here, given no possessions, nothing to call mine, not even myself. Bowing my head and clasping my hands together, I earnestly tried praying to a God that I didn't believe in. But as the hours slipped by and nobody came, I slowly began to realize that my fate was sealed. My mother had moved away a couple of years back, taking the 2 younger little girls with her. And my pathetic excuse for a father was a few cities over some 5-ish hours away. He was a struggling, violent alcoholic that rarely saw me, and didn't seem to care much of what happened to me. We'd easily went months apart without checking in or seeing one another. As for my college professors, they might even overlook my disappearance, assuming I'd just dropped out due to my sloppy attendance record. I'd quit, literally fucked myself, beginning to shiver. I realized then that I'd made myself the perfect victim, someone that wouldn't be missed right away, allowing a lot of time for my trail to run cold. Slowly, tears trickled down my cheeks as the stomach-turning realization set in. Tearfully, I looked about my cell for the 100th time. I'd been left with nearly nothing, not even a toilet, just a hole in the floor, and a sink, a crappy broken one at that. And a full-length mirror that looks to be 2-way. So if I could have my guess, there's probably people on the other side, fucking watching me. But why wouldn't they talk to me? I agonized. Least of all, tell me why I'm here, what I'd done to anger them. But just nothing. And as the invisible time ticked by, I grew closer and closer to losing my crap. I didn't realize until today that a person's reality can be decided for them if they were only placed inside of a bubble and given nothing with which to determine things with. Nobody had come to feed me or even clothe me. Were they really just planning on letting me die here? Please. I approached the mirror and took a stance before it, covering myself with my arms as best I could. Please, please just let me know that you can hear me. I waited for a response that I knew wouldn't come. Please, I'll do anything, I whispered, gazing into the mirror, but all I could see was my own haggard appearance. Disheveled, my eyes red from sleep deprivation. Quickly I turned away and sat down again, leaning my back against the wall for support. Then slowly the mind-numbing silence crept up onto me. Inside this place there was simply nothing to focus on, no stimulation of any kind. The white, squishy-looking walls held only the briefest signs of simple architect. If I could guess, my space was around 6 feet by 6 feet, going all the way up to the ceiling, making this a perfectly white square. The room's temperature too was moderate, to say the least. Not too cold, but not warm. Everything in this despicable place was lukewarm, everything. There was nothing to catch at the mind and entertain, so within hours I was lividly bored. I itched at my legs and clapped my hands together, picked at my toes and wistfully looked at the locked door, but still nobody came. I pulled my hair, walked around the room in endless circles, splashed water across my face, but nothing helped to ease the relentless nothingness of my situation. I even tried working out vigorously, but all attempts to keep my mind busy soon failed miserably. Then supper time came, or what I judged to be so. Eagerly, I waited for someone to come bring me something, but supper time came and went. At first, I tried hard to remain strong. "They'll come tomorrow," I told myself comfortingly. But when breakfast time arrived, still no food was provided. "Aren't you going to feed me?" I asked the mirror, beginning to experience the first subtle signs of hunger. My stomach had begun to twist and turn, angrily demanding for food that I didn't have. "You'll walk the room again until you're exhausted," I told myself sternly, jumping up off the hard cement floor that had become almost unbearable to sit on hours on end. I knew that if I didn't dispel some of my own energy, that I would most likely be unable to sleep that night and grow crazier in the process, even though it was difficult to determine when night even was, because the white lights about me never went out or even flickered. So I paced around again, and again in endless circles until I felt dizzy. Then I pushed myself to continue until my head was spinning. Finally, close to collapsing, I drank a little water from the sink and lay down for the night. Closing my eyes, I tried to clear my mind so that I could fall to sleep, but the torture had only begun for me. With no blankets and no pillows, sleeping in itself was a challenge. The hard, unforgiving cement floor dug into my back, and when I rolled sideways, my hips began to ache. The lights, too, began to hurt my eyes. Even when they were shut, the red color behind them kept my restless mind busy. I felt so exposed here, with nothing to hide behind or under. What if they were watching me right now? I wondered, studying my movements as I struggled to keep hold of any kind of normalcy. But the fact that they hadn't bothered to dress me also gave me the impression that I wasn't worth the trouble, wasn't good enough to be tended to or fed. As this rolled around in my head, my stomach began to groan and grumble with hunger. I couldn't even remember the last time I ate because my focus had gone down the drain. Recalling even the simplest of things was taxing and nearly impossible. Now, with no way to measure time, I just slept when I was able to. But then I woke up stiff and sore, so I stretched and exercised for hours on end. But this stretch of time, though, proved to be devastating to my mental health. Within hours, I was speaking aloud to myself, and occasionally even looking into the full-length mirror, participating in full-blown arguments with myself, seeing the boy on the other side almost as a kind of different person entirely, and not even myself anymore. I thought a lot about the past and tried to sort out all my broken memories into categories, but it was almost impossible to keep everything straight in my head. Why were the most vivid memories the bad ones? I questioned myself. I missed living so badly that it hurt my brain. I wanted a hug so desperately that I would have held on to even just a pillow or blanket to use to soothe myself. I never would have let it go if only they'd given one to me, but of course I didn't even have that. Boredom was undoubtedly eating me alive, as I'd completely lost track of time. Waking up from a small nap so disoriented that I couldn't decide whether it was morning or evening. I'd cut my own hair, breaking off each piece by piece until it was all several inches shorter. I'd tried sleeping in every position I could think of, but nothing was even close to being comfortable. The floor was torture to sleep upon, and then just like that, the morning time message just stopped coming. Finally, the only thing I could use to determine what time of day it was had gone too. I don't know why, but this sent me into a frenzied panic attack. I began obsessing over why it had stopped. Had they forgotten about me? I wondered, wringing my hands, agitated, my eyes searching about for hidden cameras, but of course I saw nothing but white. Did they merely forget to run the tape? I questioned, or was this a sign indicating that the experiment was going to be over soon? By now I was convinced that I was unwillingly participating in some sort of illegal testing, one in which people were being somehow monitored for whatever reason, kept isolated and watched to see whether they'd break or not. Now, as sadistic as this scenario sounded, this exclamation gave me some small peace of mind, because I reasoned that eventually their test would be completed, at which point I'd be allowed to go home. This notion had kept me going so far. They'd have to let me go. They couldn't keep me forever, I thought. But then why had they stopped the message? Could I just have been calculating the time wrong? Maybe it was still forthcoming, and I was being impatient. My sense of time was indeed very warped at this point. So I sat down again and leaned my back against the wall. What did their message even mean anyways? I stretched back and looked up at the blank white ceiling, folding my hands behind my head like a kind of pillow to help propped up with. This message begins by running through a great multitude of languages, almost as if they aren't sure what I speak. Hold on though. I rolled sideways and leaned up on one elbow. There's no way in hell whoever is out there hasn't heard me screaming in English. So why run it though so many different dialects? Is it to confuse me? I think a moment, then run a hand out in front of myself and gently graze it across the cement floor. The sensation of texture against my palm makes my heart flutter. Do they do this because there are multiple people in cells besides mine, and they are different language-speaking individuals? Maybe, possibly they are right beside me and I didn't even know it, kept hostage in sound-proofed white boxes even just a few short feet away. Quickly I glanced over to the walls and let myself imagine other cells and people. This thought comforts me slightly, because I'd become increasingly lonely. Shit. Lonely didn't even begin to come close to what I was feeling. I was so far removed from other people that it had taken a physical effect upon me. I'd learned the hard way that this place did things to you. It didn't hurt you or injure one on the outside, but rather it slowly ate at you from the inside out. The silence tortured you, chipping away at your sanity until you'd almost gone completely mad, and it made you endure it all alone with nobody to help ease the ache, making you rather die than be made to go on, subjected to still more silence. I closed my eyes and thought hard. What else did the message say? It always seemed to cut out right before the part that explained who was speaking. It started out by saying, "This is your," and then static. I bit at the edge of one of my fingernails, only to begin again going on to ask me to remain calm. But how could they expected me to stay calm was above me. Then the message stated that they, whoever they were, was working on trying to resolve my situation. I frowned. What did trying to resolve my situation even mean? The message almost seemed to say, "You're in trouble and we're trying to help you, or fix something." So did this mean they were on my side, and didn't mean me any harm? If so, this was very difficult to believe. If anyone did care about me, they would have supplied food and clothes, toiletries, or clean blankets, which they hadn't. Suddenly I noticed the wall across from me was rippling almost hazy with dots, or pencil tip-sized spots, slightly blue-ish in color, forming a pattern. It was some sort of code, I thought, crawling over to look at it closer. I squinted at it and saw nothing. Now I'm too close to it. I have to back up. Edging away slightly, I peered at the opposite wall. But cruelly it remained blank, so I ran back to my original position and sat back down. Still nothing. Putting my hands into my lap, I stared at the walls and tried to make sense of what I'd seen before. Then I noticed crumbs laying on the floor next to me. Carefully I pushed them around with the edge of my fingers. It was dirt. The little pile lay almost invisible on the floor, undisturbed until now. Almost happy, I entertained myself by tracing patterns into the dried-up little pieces of earth. First, I wrote my name out. Then I swished my fingers back and forth, creating swirling motions. Carefully, I draw my hand across it, erasing the drawings, to only start a fresh drawing tiny broken heart patterns and sad faces. Soon I began tracing out miniature stick figures and tiny house patterns, making little trees next to them. But all too soon, I grew tired of this tediousness work and turned to counting out each crumb individually. But try as I did, this work came to be almost harder than drawing tiny pictures, and I soon gave up. My stomach was nauseous with hunger, and my concentration spent. I knew enough about biology to know that days without food meant my body had begun cannibalizing itself to keep me going. But the crazy part was I didn't know for sure if it had been days or just a few hours. Briefcase man. When he finally shows himself, I was so taken aback to see another human being that I don't even react. He just appeared one day without warning, entering my prison with a briefcase in one hand and a long white cane in the other. He didn't even look at me. He just walked right past me and proceeded to open up his mysterious briefcase-looking thing. Frozen to the spot, I just watched him fascinated as my captor produced a small plastic white bowl from the contents of his case and lays it down on the floor in front of me. I didn't even move. I just stared at him wide-eyed and tried to figure out whether he was real or not, convinced that there was a chance he might only be one of my frequent hallucinations. But instead of vanishing right away, he breaks open an unmarked white bottle, and as I watch, pours a kind of white liquid into the dish, as if it's breakfast cereal and milk, but without the cereal. As I study him closer, I realized that he's pretty young, about my own age, only much better looking, practically model status. Late 20s something and tall with strong broad shoulders as if he works out. He has waves of perfectly styled brown hair, lightly bleached at the ends, that falls into his face as he leans forward and shoves the bowl towards me, as I just sit dumbfounded and stares at him like an idiot. The briefcase man is wearing a plain t-shirt with an apron tossed over that. I swallowed as my stomach audibly groans with hunger. But before I can say a word or even react, he's snapped his briefcase shut and has turned to leave, still ignoring me as if I wasn't even here. Tripping over the bowl, I reached out frantically to grab hold of the half-open door, suddenly wild to get his attention. "Wait!" I screamed as the door slammed shut on my hands. "Let me out!" Frantically, I pounded on the unyielding door, ignoring the pain in my smashed fingers. "You have to come back!" I sobbed. "Please come back!" I begged, slamming my body into the door again and again. But he doesn't return. Finally, a man had come into my cell, and I hadn't even made a break for it until it was too late. "You're so fucking stupid," I screamed at myself, now raging inwardly. "You're a piece of worthless shit that deserves to sit and rot," I told myself, furious that I hadn't been able to escape or even talk to the man. Viscously, I began to reproach myself for failing to do anything. Somewhere in the last few days, I'd begun talking to myself to keep from losing my mind, but the inner dialogue had become ruthless to me and dark within hours. They were almost like the three ghosts from the movie I watched once, always berating and scolding me for even the smallest of things. They stood or hovered just inches away outside of my body, looming up behind me, as if looking disapprovingly over my shoulder. But unlike the small, goofy cartoons characters from the movie, these people were stern, harsh correctors bent upon making me feel as badly as possible. Rigidly, I placed myself in front of the mirror and stared daggers at the skinny wreck of a reflection that wildly looked back at me with hate-filled empty eyes. "You deserve to die alone in here for failing to escape." I shriek at the pale-faced boy that hung back and shivered at my raised tone. I didn't mean to. I quiver. Then suddenly I notice the bowl briefcase man had left, laying upside down on the floor where I'd spilled it. He was probably bringing your skinny ass something good to drink, but you spoiled it for us. The internal voices taunted as I kneeled down. Look at it, it's almost all gone. The voices laughed harshly as I dipped my fingers into the drips that were all that was left. Lick it up off the floor, they commanded, so I leaned down and tentatively tried to lick up what spilled liquid I could still get. But there was no taste, and it was mostly gone. See, if you weren't such a good-for-nothing little shit, you might have enough brains not to spill the only substance you've been given in the last 3 days. The inner voices barked at me. I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter, Quinn. You didn't even say thank you. I know, I'm sorry. Sorry. Don't say sorry to us. I don't know. I let out quickly, picking up the bowl and licking around the edges. Just you better hope that he's not angry with you. Why would he be angry with me? I asked, frightened. Because, you stupid runt. You didn't even try to be polite. No good morning, no nothing. The inner voices trailed off into laughter, and I curled back up into the corner, hugging my knees to my chest. I rocked back and forth as they continued to talk to themselves in my head. Maybe Briefcase Man was testing you, trying to see if you were a real man or not. Why would he do that? I asked between my tears. Well, I don't know. Maybe he wants to see if you'd try to fight him or not, but now I guess he thinks that you're a weak baby, doesn't he, you fucked up, you little crap? No, stop it. What do you mean, stop it? We're in your head. But you're not man enough to handle things, are you? So that's why we're here. Shuddering, I curled up against the wall. I am too strong, I will fight him next time. Oh, Quinn. The inners sighed with used up patience. There won't be a next time. What do you mean? I half scrambled up. Please, you don't think he's actually going to come back now, do you? You didn't even say thank you. No, I know. But wouldn't he forgive me for that just this once? And give me another chance? Would you give you another chance? Painful silence. Yes, I would. No, you wouldn't. You want to know why? Sniffling. Because you're worthless runt that don't deserve another chance. Closing my eyes, I turned to rocking again. Now, you skinny crap, start walking until we say you can stop. If you don't get enough walking in, we won't be able to sleep tonight. Silently, I obeyed and began the endless pacing back and forth. Even though the message had stopped coming, the sight of another human being began to cheer me up despite what the voices had said. He'd brought some kind of meal replacement with him, and maybe he'd be back tomorrow. But if he did come back, this time I'd be ready for him. I'd decided to jump the man and make a break for it. Sitting down with my back against the wall in my favorite corner, I waited for night to come. Who is he? The inners asked, sitting down cross-legged beside me. Frighteningly, they have become clearer in my mind, so real that I can almost feel them as they tumble past me to sit. I don't know. He doesn't look like a prison guard. Well, that's kinda obvious, don't you think? One of the voices mocks me, irritated. If those people were as simple as prison guards and wardens, they would have put clothes on your skinny ass. Yes, the other two laughed, giving my body a disgusted side glance. Fuck off, I snapped. And he would have given you 3 proper meals a day, Quincy, if they were real government people. Putting you in with other prisoners and giving you lawyers and such. I guess you're right, I sighed, looking off into the distance. In my own colorful imagination, I'd painted a whole picture across the opposite wall. A bright mirror of an afternoon sunset. Just a faint glimpse into another world, with tall golden grass waving lightly in the slight breeze. There's a field of cows eating grass quietly, and the sun is setting just about now. leaving the sky a beautiful smudge of neon pinks and baby blue. "So then who is he, this man as you like to call him?" the voices asked, fidgeting. "Quinn, are you still with us?" "Yes." I tear my eyes away from the soft picture that's almost too pretty to believe and look wearily at my companions. The three inners sit slouched beside me and frown. "What?" I ask emotionlessly. "You're not looking good, Quinn. Don't you want to try and figure this out?" One of them places a hand on my shoulder, and I realized with a little shiver that I can feel his hand on my skin as clearly as day. I mean, he's the only one that can take care of you now. Aren't you even a little bit curious? I lay down. Maybe tomorrow. I'm too tired now to think about it. Dreamily, I glanced back out to the open country. The field of golden grass is so beautiful that tears begins to trickle down my cheeks. Before, even a couple of days ago, all I could see was white. I hated it, and then I became afraid of it. Terrified that I might start seeing things in its endless white vastness. I picked up a cool glass of champagne, enjoying the elegant design in my hand, and take a slow sip of its sharp bit. But now I'm not afraid of anything. My imagination is the only thing I have left. I almost laughed, and they can't take that away, I think to myself. Later, "What if your briefcase man doesn't come back?" the inners asked when I woke up from a long, drawn-out nap that had almost completely engulfed me. "What if he waits until you've completely gone mad?" I splash cold water across my face, smile. The three of them are rolling up blankets and pillows, but they haven't bothered to share with me. "If he doesn't come back, then I'll at least be rid of you three." I half chuckle, beginning my morning rounds of walking about the room, no longer bothered that the floor is hard and I don't have any shoes. My feet have grown calloused over the space of time I've been locked up here. "He tried to bring me something yesterday," I said calmly. "He'll come back again today, just you wait and see. It's not today, silly." The older voice gave me a gentle shove. "You were only sleeping for 5 minutes, and that briefcase man came in here about 2 hours before that, so you'll have to wait for him for another couple of lifetimes." They all laughed, then grew serious. "But honestly, how long do you think you have? You haven't eaten anything in days now." Thoughtfully, I looked over to the mirror in the opposite corner. My optimum slowly trickling away. I was trying hard not to think about it, but I was rapidly losing weight. My cheeks were hollow and my chest was not just flayed anymore. It looked sunken in and unnaturally bony. One of them suddenly transformed into a doctor with a white coat and instruments. He squinted at me specifically and held up a magnifying glass. "Yesterday you counted every rib on your rib cage, and you thought we hadn't seen. But my boy, we see everything." He sat down behind a large oak wooden desk and faced me with a blank expression. "Even the times you touch yourself thinking we might not be around." I blushed red. "I don't want to talk about that," I say quickly. "Well, now neither do we. Do you think it's enjoyable to watch a skinny dying boy fight with himself to have enough strength to get himself off? It's depressing." He wiped his hands on a white cloth. "Fuck, you guys are going to drive me crazy." The doctor touched his gold-rimmed glasses with the rag. "Well, that's cute. You have already gone crazy, my dear young man." One of the others put on a doctor's coat and came up to me. "Beside the obvious, I'd say you have a couple of weeks if you're lucky." He studied my chest and wrote down something into an imaginary binder. "But that obsessive working out routine," he clicked his tongue. "This must stop. It isn't helping you. It's just eating at what energy you do have, and this." He smiled. "Must be saved for your own private needs. Will you guys leave me alone already, God?" I turned away. Briefcase man seems more robot than human. He didn't smile, didn't speak, and only moved with deliberate steps in the exact same fashion he had the day before. His presence made the hair on the backs of my arms stand up and bristle with pent-up tension. I couldn't read him, couldn't decide whether or not he could be trusted. But he commanded a sense of danger about him, which made my body's alarm bells go off and ring. His appearance was captivating, enchanted, and once you saw him, you almost couldn't bring yourself to look away. Briefcase Man had recently showered today, because his hair was damp and falling across his forehead messily. Dimly, I caught a whiff of subtle aftershave that made me hesitant before jumping him. All my senses were so greatly heightened that any new variables introduced to my bland white environment came as a kind of shock to my senses. But the desire to be freed overcame myself, because the instant that his back was turned, I fell upon him. Wrapping my arms about his neck, I began screaming, clinging onto him like a crazed lunatic. But he must have been expecting some sort of outburst, because in a flash, he had effortlessly flipped me onto my back so hard that it made my teeth rattle. His eyes cut into me as he rolled my body over with the toe of his foot, and proceeded to place a foot firmly down into the middle of my back. Ow! I let out as he pinned me to the floor. I flinched as crumbs, grime, and dirt began to stick to my face. What was he going to do to me, I wondered. Would I finally be told why I was being kept here? But no, instead I found out why he carried a cane. It was for beating me with, because within seconds Briefcase Man was pummeling me with lightning-fast vicious blows placed with precision across my upper back and shoulders, not even giving me time to brace myself for it. Startled by the rain of sudden abuse, I covered my arms across my head and balled up in attempts to escape it, but to no avail. And Briefcase Man doesn't say anything. He just hits me until I was trembling and whimpering for him to stop. "Please, just let me go," I cried as Briefcase Man turned to the work at hand, as if nothing had happened. Broken from my trance, I began edging towards him. "I'll do anything you ask, just please." Slowly, he kneeled down and opened his case, ignoring me as he had done before. "Just give me something to wear," I begged, still naked and defenseless. "Why are you keeping me here?" I questioned, as Briefcase Man pulled out a new plastic bowl and laid it on the ground. "Aren't you going to say anything?" I asked. "Say something," I screamed, jumping up again. I made a fight for the door. Maybe if I was lucky it would be unlocked. But as before, the Briefcase Man used his stick to subdue me. But this time he didn't hold back as before. This time he hit me with real feeling, almost as if he enjoyed it. Viscously, he flattened me out across the floor, and then stood on one of my arms to keep me held still. No. I gave a little wail as his cane came down once again across fresh welts. "Please," I sobbed out at the burning sting. Closing my eyes, I saw stars as the wet swats increased in veracity. In a blinding instant, my whole body grew stiff and attempted to close off and escape the pain. He seemed to sense this and eventually let off, growing tired of hitting his limp ragdoll boy, and with almost a slight smirk, he turned away from me to finish his tasks. He bent down again and poured the steaming white liquid into my dish, as if I were a stray kitten, and he had decided to feed me. Then, without even looking at my trembling, pathetic heap on the floor, painted in splotchy red wheels from his cane, Briefcase Man left. As the door closed on me, I began to cry hysterically. Worse than the abuse, or even starvation, was the isolation. The knowledge that when he was gone, that I'd have to be alone again. "Come back," I sobbed pitifully. "Please come back. I won't try to run away, I promise." I folded my hands and crawled to my knees, whimpering at the stiffness in my legs when I leaned onto them. "Just sit with me for a few moments, that's all I ask. I'll tell you whatever you want to hear." Somehow I thought that it was all over. I'd stupidly let myself imagine that he'd come to get me, that I'd be set free at last. But cruelly, this hadn't been the case. and I wasn't sure I could handle the heart-wrenching disappointment. "Just please," I yelled, hoping he'd see my tears and take pity on me. "Please, won't you come back?" I wailed, hoping he'd change his mind. Even if it was just a glimpse of his face, that would be enough. But he didn't return. Perhaps the hardest form of abuse was to simply leave me here alone. "Are you hurt?" the inners asked morbidly, coming back into my head to survey the damage. I slouched forward and shook my head, only feeling a dull pounding sensation where he'd hit me. "No," I replied, picking up the bowl he'd left behind. They circled me and I flinched as their eyes took in what he'd done to me. "Looks like you took a rather good slamming," one of them commented as I began sloppily drinking. I shrugged bare shoulders. "Well, look at yourself." The three watchers poked at me. "What did he use on you?" "Just leave it alone," I howled, tipping the bowl. "Did he tell you what he wanted? I mean, your little jailbait ass has to be here for something." One of them pushed. "No, he didn't even look at me," I replied, with a small tremor in my voice. "Clearly, or else he would have seen how cold you look and probably would have given you something to cover up with." I half turned. "Unless," he paused, "unless he liked to see you suffer. Hey, can't you let me drink this in peace?" I settled back and slurped my milk loudly. "How is it?" one of them inquired, watching me drink half-starved. "It's fine," I murmured. He hadn't left me with any silverware, so I was forced to drink like an animal, licking it up like a dog. But in my dehumanized state, I hardly even noticed this. Almost immediately, I felt the milk quenching my insatiable hunger. It was bland and essentially tasteless, but I couldn't care less. The warm, somewhat thick milk, like formula, was soothing. I could literally feel it fixing me from the inside out. "It's almost like he put you on a diet." Of them commented. "No, I'm not saying you need one, but if he truly cared, wouldn't there be at least real food?" Slowly, hours dragged by, and sadly, milk's healing effects don't seem to last very long. And within hours, I'm starving again. But now, all I can think about was when my next meal was going to come. All I could focus on was the comforting warmth it had provided. How the chalky bean-like protein-flavored texture had, for a few sweet minutes, drowned out all my suffering. And then I thought about the beating. It too had left a strong impression on me. That day I learned something important. Briefcase man could and would interact with me if it meant putting me back in line. Today I leaned that he'd hit me if I tried anything, and this at least was something. Time gap. "Don't do it." The three voices stood behind me as I crouched by the door and waited, listening for his footsteps. "I know what you're waiting for," the oldest of the three reproached me. "You want to make him angry so he'll beat you again, but I'm telling you, this is not how you get his attention." "Yes, it is," I answered, turning hurt, dead eyes up to his face. "Can't you see? This is the only way he'll pay attention to me. Tonight I wanted to see how much I could take. When he inflicted pain on me, found that it brought me out of this cell. It numbed my hunger, and it made me feel present. Because now, more often than not, I began to live in fairy land somewhere up in my head. Anxiously, I waited, facing the door. "He's not coming tonight. Forgot about it." One of my companions huffed some feet away, lifting a mug of coffee off of his makeshift table. "I don't care," I replied. "I'm going to wait for him." "Fine, but don't expect us to sit up with you and watch." "Then don't," I replied, quite all right with being left alone, or so I thought. Patiently, I tilted my head forward and listened again. Footsteps. "Hey, listen," I cried, "he's coming back." The inners shuffled and looked over at me. "Quick, I think he's coming back." Anxiously, I bit my nails and couched near to the vault door. "Quinn." "Hey, he's not coming back, you're just hearing things." the soothing voice of one of my companions attempted to say, but I brushed off their words as the door flung open. All three of the voices leapt it up in surprise. "Something's wrong," one of them gasped, baking away from me. He shouldn't have been back for at least another day. "Maybe they're trying to fuck with your internal sense of time by coming regularly to feed you," one of them commented to the other. Questingly, I looked to Briefcase blank face, like a frightened child. "Please, sir." I almost winced at the sound of my own voice. He didn't turn around or look. He simply leans down and opened up his briefcase. "I'm cold in here," I say tremendously, reaching out a hand to him. "Please give me something to wear." I plead, beginning to quiver. Timidly, I approached him. "Speak up, Quincy, before I can be shut down. I don't think he hears you." One of the inners chirps up, helpfully. "Hey you," impulsively. I grab his arm that's pure muscle. He flings around and smacks me in the jaw, sending me crashing hard into the plush foam wall, stunned. "You can't just leave me in here without any explanation." I began to scream as he proceeds to slam a fist into my cheek as punishment for me speaking. I double over at the pain but don't stop. It's inhuman to treat me like this. I sobbed out, struggling to my shaky feet. Again, he makes a wide swing at my face and breaks my lip open. "For God's sakes, tell me why I'm here," I cried. But he doesn't react to my screams. He just picks up his stick from off the floor like a walking mannequin. "Come on," I shriek. "Give me some fucking clothes and feed me. I mean, who are you fucking bastards to treat somebody like this?" Without a goddamn word, he uses his cane to hit me, and I'm momentarily paralyzed by the intense shock of the smack. Dumbly, I look down at the red mark, and then slowly a crazy smile spreads across his face, and he vanishes before my very eyes, his head stretching open like bubble gum. I gasp and jumped back as the inners begins to laugh at me. That was hilarious. One of them finally gets out between frightening giggles. Horrified, I swirled around. "You just hallucinated your briefcase man into existence for a full 2 minutes." Slowly, wide glass green eyes fixed on the mirror in front of me. But I felt every single blow as if it were really happening. I said softly, bewildered. "Interesting." He lays back down. "Our little charge is beginning to crave abuse." They chuckle. Anything to stop the sensory desperation. The what? Sensory desperation, it's a term for the lack of activity in your brain. If you're left for days or even hours on your own without any signals firing inside that brain of yours. He tapped his forehead. Your mind will begin to lose grip on reality, causing sporadic behaviors, depression. He looked to the others. And hallucinations. Tuesday. Tuesdays used to be my favorite day of the week because it meant getting off from collage early. Thoughtfully, I crawled up to my feet and declared that today must be a Tuesday because I was feeling atomistic. Today I'd come up with a great idea. What if I just refused to drink my milk? I asked the inners timidly, almost frightened by my new grand plans. "No," the inners gasped. "You'll die." "Good, I hope I do. Maybe that would be better than being kept here alone like a little pet rat." "Well, that's pretty much all I am anymore, aren't I?" I turned to the stern-faced ghosts of my imagination. "Sure, Quinn. Do whatever you want, we don't care anymore," one of them replied, strolling away. "I have golf in an hour anyways." "Sure you do, and I have an appointment to spend tea time with the Queen," I retorted, squaring my shoulders, attempting to be brave. Starvation would in itself be like a new kind of torture, but I was willing to take it. Briefcase man brings it in a small tumbler of powdered meal replacement around each day. But what if something was to change? What if I ignored him like he does to me? What if I stopped feeding? Then suddenly the power would be in my hands, right? And if he doesn't want me to die, then he'd have to make something happen. Sounds to me like you're just hurting yourself. The oldest of my companions replied, troubled by my idea. Come on, he obviously doesn't want me to die right away, because he's starting to bring me milk. I stand up and begin pacing, then I kick the empty bowl away. I'm done with this shit. Next day, Briefcase Man entered my cell somewhere in the early hours of the morning, armed with his hateful stick and that stupid briefcase. The inners snickered at me and made faces. Here's your handsome jailer Quinn. Are you sure you want to disobey him and break the rules? One prods me. But I made no effort to move. I simply sat up dejectedly and turned beaten dead eyes upon him as he goes over to the dish he'd left the day before. I'm sure he'd be happy to turn you over his knee and show you what the stick of his feels like again. All the voices chuckled in unison, and I watched Briefcase Man carelessly lean down and pick up my dish. Would he care about me if I simply stopped eating? I questioned, close to breaking. It took almost everything I had not to fall upon that bowl and lick it up clean. But somehow I forced myself to stay put and not move a muscle. But Briefcase Man didn't care or even notice my internal struggle. He simply snapped his briefcase closed and turned his back on me to leave. Please don't go. I wanted to get up and beg him, come back, don't leave me here. I wanted to plead on my knees, but I didn't. Dying inside, I let him walk away without so much as a word. Digging my fingernails into my palms to ease the ache, I hugged my knees and began crying, taken over by emotion. It was so hard to watch him go. I almost couldn't bear it. But if this works, it will be worth the pain. My mind says, just try to stay busy. Entertain yourself. Slowly I got up. I'll count to 1,000. 1, 2, 3. As the numbers are counted out, I begin walking about in large circles, doing my best to avoid the bowl of milk. I want him to know that I didn't even touch it. I think after counting out 1,000 steps, I want the Briefcase Man to see that I'm openly rebelling. Splashing water across face and hands, I sit back down. But what if he lets you die? The voices asked, creeping up on me to look over my shoulder. Well, then I'll die, I say, folding my arms stubbornly. It took longer than I would have thought for the man to finally return. But on day 5 or so, he did come back, looking even better than the day before, if that was even possible. He wore the same boring clothes, and again didn't wear shoes. He didn't look at me, didn't speak. He just did as he had the day before. And so I watched anxiously, hoping for any kind of chance in his stiff demeanor. But maddeningly, nothing new happened. He just poured the milk I hadn't drank down the drain as if it were nothing at all, and slowly opened a new bottle and poured the liquid into a bowl for me. By now, my body was screaming for me to react, to tackle him and at least try to escape, but I couldn't. I had to show him that I was serious. Laying down, I ignored the milk and tried to take a nap, but my mind refused to sleep. What do you think his name is? I asked the voices as we all droop about my cage with nothing else to do. Who? Come on, you know. I hold out a sallow-colored hand. Briefcase Man. Oh, your jailer. Yes. What's his name, do you think? We don't know. God, you guys are literally brain dead. I sigh, frustrated. Slowly, I close my eyes and try to remember him better. He's psycho, isn't he? Why do you want to know what his name is anyways? The voices ask. You wouldn't understand, you're not people. Well, does this feel real? One of them shoved me. I frown. Maybe his name is Jeff, he looks like a Jeff. Seriously? Yeah. He seems mysterious too, as if he's hiding a dirty secret. I slide back to the floor and look over at the inners. You're his secret. They snickered. Maybe his name's John. He looks like a John or possibly a Joe. Nah, he's Jeff. I snapped. I think you're getting a little too attached to Jeff Quincy. Nah, what are you talking about? It's true you haven't been able to talk about anything else for hours. Maybe you want to get Jeff's attention so that... Hey, just stop it. And so the days came and went, and so did the briefcase man. On day 5, I had a several meltdown, beating my body into the walls and screaming until I felt satisfied. Hurting myself was my new favorite form of distraction, and I hadn't held back. Each new form of self-inflicted pain brought me renewed relief until I was a battered, sickly mess what wouldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore. Shortly after this, he was back, wearing crisp white clothes and a grimy apron. He poured my milk into my bowl then. For the first time, he actually looked at me, hesitating, as if he had finally noticed how weak and frail I'd become. Scrapped arms and hands that had received the brunt of my own abuse. Was he finally going to do something? Would he scream at me? I wondered. Probably not. But then he turned away and left, sending me into a tantrum. If he wanted to watch me descend into madness, then I'd give him the show he wanted to see. First, I slammed myself into the door. The only part of my cell besides that floor hadn't been thickly padded. Then I beat my fists into the mirror until calloused knuckles broke open. Seeing my own blood immediately stopped me, and I sank down to the floor feeling a strange sense of calm that I couldn't describe. Then sometime later, I couldn't say when Briefcase Man came back for me. Stubbornly, I sat in my corner, making no movement to get the milk he brought, and for some reason today was the day he broke. Who do you think you are? He stormed over to me and grabbed hold of my shoulders. Just the sound of his voice exploding in my dead Selene made me jump. Nobody had spoken to me in weeks, it felt like. And now, suddenly, he was yelling at me. Bursting out into tears, I flung sideways as he brought down his suitcase over my head. "Speak up, Quinn." He shook me hard and I melted into his strong arms, shivering uncontrollably. Somehow he already knew my name, I thought with a distant twing. And here was his first mistake. By using my name instead of a number, or even just nothing at all, he had unknowingly humanized himself. He wasn't a cruel monster anymore. He was my jailer, somebody that knew my name and came here just for me. "What's wrong with the milk?" he shouted into my face. His rage so intimidating that I began to pee myself. But I didn't answer him. I almost couldn't. My teeth were chattering too hard. Embarrassed and soaked, I tried to slink away, but he wouldn't allow this. "Perfect. You can't do anything right if it was to save your goddamn life." He stomped on the hand I leaned on for support, and I let out a hollow gasp as his foot lifted to slam down on me once again. "Why wouldn't you drink it?" He searches my face closely, but I can't make eye contact. I'm too beaten down to dare look at him, and somehow this makes him even angrier. "You know a belting while wet will hurt far more than if you were dry." He shook me violently, and I felt my mind begin to spin off balance like a top. "Answer me. Why wouldn't you drink your damn milk?" His eyes flashed dangerously as I faced the floor and kept. He doesn't seem used to being ignored because my silence only makes him shake me harder. "I'm going to give you 3 seconds. He drops me and steps away. "Drink that milk of yours, or I'm going to help you drink it." "I'd like that," I think dimly as he dragged me over to the bowl. "Drink it, you fool." The inners echoed, but I remained stone-faced, so Briefcase Man skipped the counting part and roughly shoved my face into the overly hot liquid. "I guess you're choosing the hard way then," he barked as I gasped a breath, my head held firmly down. Choking, I gasped for air and take in a mouthful of the milk. He pulls my head back up and I swallowed hard, coughing violently. "Keep going," he instructs, firmly pushing on the back of my head. Again, my face is forced into the milk, and I take another shuddering gulp of milk. Good boy. He patted the top of my head, and then lets go of my shoulders abruptly. Don't go. I drop the empty bowl and grab hold of his legs, attempting to keep him here. Please, I query. I'll drink my milk every day, I promise. Oh yeah, I doubt that very much. He leaned down and I clung onto him even harder. Yes, I'll be a very good boy, if that's what you want. Seeing him hesitant gives me fragile hope. He picks up his briefcase and turns to me. Maybe next time. No. Please stay with me today. I folded my hands together and crawled to my bruised knees. He chuckles at my vain attempts to please him. I'll be very obedient, you'll see. I start crying. If he'd just put his arms around me and hold me tight, maybe I'd stop dying inside, I thought with a breaking heart. But you're not a good boy. He shifted the white beating cane under his arm. You're a stupid pet that tries to get what he wants by force. He turned on his heels. Manipulation will never get you what you want, Quinn. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll stop acting out, I promise. Dimly, I feel the inners circle me and attempt to comfort me. But the empty room is too much for me to bear. I hate it here. I cried, my head buried into one of the voices' laps. I'll never be good enough for him. Every time I try, I just fuck it all up. I choked as his hands moved through my hair. I don't know what he wants or how to help myself. Tears burned my eyes as I endured the pain. What am I doing wrong? I asked brokenly. It hurts so bad and he doesn't seem to see that I...
Subscribe to stay updated on more stories and to get part 2. My channel is dedicated to writing short fictional novels containing love stories and exploring the kinkier sides of people's secret lives. Trigger warning: there will be mention of abuse and darker undertones, so ready with F secretion is recommended.